Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, Biden's been pretend president for like 2 days now. But look how much the world is healing already. I mean, look, this is the Hill. The Hill, indoor concerts may be made safe from coronavirus spread. Well, gosh golly, wouldn't you know it? How about that? Get ready for a bunch of similar new studies to come out over the next few days. Here's the Daily Mail. Official data is exaggerating the risk of COVID. Talk of second wave misleading. It's an election day miracle. We're gonna do a segment tomorrow on how we are living in 2 different realities. Or not, it's not even 2 different realities, it's an infinite number of different realities. We're all living in our own little pods. It's never been like this before ever. And you can choose to live in whatever little virtual reality land you want. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but check this out. This is AFP, it's like the French AP. Contrary to Donald Trump's impulsive policies in the Middle East, Joe Biden is expected to shift back to a more conventional U.S. stance and re-engage with Iran. What? Hold on. So hold on. So Donald Trump's unprecedented and unthinkable peace deals in the Middle East with Israel and other Arab nations is characterized as impulsive. But going back to our pro-Iran strategy, which we did a mere 8 years ago, is the U.S. conventional stance. Get ready for 4 more years of this. And it's gonna be shameless. 4 more years. Remember David Brooks, it was back in 2008. David Brooks from the New York Times wrote this whole article about how he noticed the crease in Obama's pants. And he knew that he would be a great president because he had such a perfect crease in his pants. Okay, get ready for 4 years of that. 4 years of, well, Trump brought this up a lot at the end of the campaign. Mr. Vice President, what flavor did you get? As he's leaving the ice cream stand. We got one more here. Oh, this is the BBC. After 4 years of no dog in the White House, Champ and Major Biden will be moving in, and Major will be the first ever rescue dog to be first canine. Do you feel the healing? Is this what the healing feels like? Do you feel your soul restored? That's what Biden said he'd do. Restore your soul. Not sure to what exactly or how a president does that. Also, I've heard people say, no more babies ripped from their mother's womb. I wouldn't be womb. They still do that. Ripped from their mother's breast at the border. No more kids in cages. Now, of course, it was Obama and Biden who built the cages, and Trump ended those policies. That's the truth of it, minor detail. Let that sink in, actually. I was going to rush past that, but let's sit on that for just 1 second. People are mad that Trump put kids in cages, when in reality, of all people, it was Joe Biden as vice president that built the cages. It wasn't even a Democrat who built it. It was specifically Barack Obama and Joe Biden's administration. Trump ended that policy. So to solve the problem of Trump's kids in cages, which is no longer even a thing, the American people hired the guy who built them. Make sense? The truth is, bad things won't stop happening. It's just the media will stop covering the bad things that are happening. So that way people can create in their virtual reality bubble whatever they want. Which is why we hear now so much about the healing, all the healing. You feeling the healing? This annoys me so much, the healing. Listen, the left they're gonna gloat a little. It's fine. I'm not gonna criticize people on the left for gloating. I would have gloated a little bit too. I wouldn't have tweeted out videos of me dancing, right? I wouldn't have cried on the air like Van Jones did. When we were doing election night coverage, could you ever imagine Jesse Kelly, Buck Sexton, Bill O'Reilly, and Mike Slater crying because Trump won? That's just so amazing. Did you ever, before like the left wins and it's like a cry session. And Van Jones is, it's so much easier to be a dad now Character matter. I actually think we have the video. Do we have the video of the whole thing? This is Van Jones.
Well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happier to have babies snatched away or send dreamers back for no reason. This is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. You know, the I can't breathe. You know, that wasn't just George Floyd. That was a lot of people that felt that they couldn't breathe.
Listen, I'm being serious here. That's delusional stuff. That's delusional stuff. And it's sad that people can base so much of their lives on made-up things. There was no Muslim ban. Obama started kids in cages. Trump ended it. What does Donald Trump have to do with George Floyd? Nothing. It's a blue state, blue city, black police chief. Nothing. So Trump, let's say Trump goes away. What's changed? There was never a Muslim ban. Biden was the guy who built the cages, and dozens of kids are still being shot every weekend in Chicago, Van. And that's my point. This division that we supposedly had these last few years, it was a media creation. It was entirely a media creation. It's all made up. They made all of this up for 4 years. All of it, all the Russian collusion, the phone call with Ukraine, that was the basis for impeachment that was so bad, the president released the transcript of it the next day. Right? All of their being against every single thing that Trump did with COVID, literally every step of the way, going back to January. All of that was entirely a media creation. And now they won the election, and now they say it's time for healing. Yeah, sure, as long as you fall in line with them and their principles and their worldview and their policies. Fall in line, and then you can feel the healing. Even if their policies were the ones that built cages, snatched babies. Media won't cover that. So what would happen, let's say Joe Biden rebuilds the cages, right? Because we're restoring the soul of the nation. Maybe that's part of it. So we rebuild the cages. I guarantee you the media, they'll take pictures of it. They won't print them. They'll just save them for next time there's a Republican president and then release the pictures as if the Republican president built the cages. We'll do it all over again. The 4 years of hysteria that we had the last 4 years, they won't end. It won't end, even in the time of healing. All the hysteria of Trump starting wars, too unhinged to be near the nuclear codes. And here we are, no new wars, Middle East peace deals, no nuclear holocaust. And no one who made those claims all these last 4 years is ever going to be held accountable for sowing the division that they say we must now all heal from. I hear people who talk about this profound grief they've had these last 4 years. They've been so scared these last 4 years. It's all made up in your mind, man. All made up. It's all made up. You made it all up. And now you want to heal after calling half the country racist, bigots, sexist, white supremacists. And I can't be a party to your delusion. Don Lemon, he said, I don't dare speak for my colleagues, but I can't tell you how difficult it's been as a journalist to cover this dark part of our history. Let's hope the attack on journalists, journalism, and everyone end. Time to move into the light. Obama used the Espionage Act to go after whistleblowers more than every other president in history combined. But Trump was mean in this dark part of our history? And how have you managed, Don, with your $4 million a year salary? It's been so tough for you. So it's technically called the Thomas Theorem. I don't know why it's called the Thomas Theorem, but the Thomas Theorem says if men believe that a situation is real, it becomes real in its consequences. So if someone believes a situation to be real, it becomes real in its consequences. So the classic example here would be a kid, which actually is a pretty good metaphor. A kid in bed, scared of a monster in the closet, There is no monster in the closet. But the kid thinks it's real, and the consequence of thinking it's real is the same as if it were real, right? That was Trump. It was a monster under the bed. The left acted for 4 years like he was a murderous tyrant. And in Don Lemon's world, he was. It's totally delusional. But now it's time to heal. So you ready for all the healing? By the way, whenever someone says that, have them define it. Have them define the word healing. So healing to me means let's both admit fault. Let's ask for forgiveness for each other. Let's forgive each other. Let's move forward with a new understanding. That's healing to me, right? It's like a classic definition. Ask someone what they mean by healing today. Because it looks a lot like I won and now you have to agree with me. That seems to be the new that version of healing feels a lot like submission, which is very different. The Archbishop in Philadelphia, his name's Charles Chaput, he said, evil, he said this a while back, not in relation to this, but he said, evil preaches tolerance. Evil preaches tolerance until it is dominant. Then it tries to silence the good. That's the kind of healing I think they're actually talking about. The stock market went through the roof yesterday because of vaccine news, and that's great. Gold prices dropped a little bit, which is great too, right? Lower price for you right now, today, to get into gold and silver if you haven't yet, or buy some more, because the economic realities are still true and they're still not good. So I live in San Diego. We're facing another complete total shutdown here in San Diego County. All right, it's up to our high vaulted leaders in Sacramento. They'll decide today, literally today, if we're going to be in the purple zone for the next month. And everything has to shut down again here in San Diego. It's insane. But wherever you are in the country, we as a nation still have to pay for all these $1 trillion stimulus packages. That's going to hit eventually. Gold's not tied to the stock market as much as it is the value of the dollar. And stock market up, down, the value of the dollar is still plummeting. The Fed issued a report just yesterday that they're running out of ammo. They're running out of things to do to prevent or decrease the shock to the economy that we're in right now. Right? Stock market had a great day yesterday. It's great. It's not going to last. Gold's been lasting for 5,000 years. So get some. Great day to buy today. Prices dropped a bit. And I'm playing the long game. I think it's a smart game. There are really bad economic realities that are not pretty. Patriot Gold Group, call them up. It takes just a few minutes to get gold on the way to you, and it's there in just a couple days. Couldn't be easier. For me, it's safety, it's purchasing power, it's catastrophic insurance, and we're not out of the woods yet for this election. And then even it's something to pass down to your kids and grandkids, which is awesome. 1-800-798-4216. Give them a call. Real life person is going to pick up the phone, ask any questions you have whatsoever. And then when you want to sell your gold back, if you do, no fees. Just sell it right back to them. 1-800-798-4260 or PatriotGoldGroup.com. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So a couple of odd things about the election that was. So from 2000 to 2016, if you look at the bellwether county, so bellwether county is a county that every time, so all 5 presidential elections from 2000 to 2016, got it right? So if this candidate wins the county, then they win the whole nation. There's only 24 bellwether counties across the country that have gotten every single election right. Pretty wild, right? 24 of them nationwide, right? So again, they always get it right, these 24. Trump won 20 of them. So these counties got every election right the last 5 years, and this election, almost every single one of them got it wrong. Totally flipped. It's pretty wild. Another odd anomaly, if you will, Madison, Wisconsin. We may have mentioned this one yesterday. So the Republican turnout increased 10%. The Democrat turnout increased 20%. If the Democrats increased only the same amount as the Republicans did, that's 20,000 votes, and Trump would have won Wisconsin. One county in Wisconsin. So you can do whatever you want with those numbers. But there were a lot of weird anomalies like that. I think, guys, do we have the graph of Atlanta here as well? So this, if we have it. Yeah. So all those lines at the bottom, these are all the different counties. And it's the increased voter turnout for Trump and Biden from 2016. And look at those giant blue lines. Those are all the counties around Atlanta. What the heck did they do in Atlanta to get out the vote? That's what you're supposed to believe. But that's pretty wild, right? Those are different. Those are something. All right. Many more to come. One last point on that, on the last segment we did. There's a nice newsletter I like. It's called Farnham Street. And they had a good line. They said a lot of problems happen because of your internal state. When you're calm, happy, and fulfilled, you don't pick fights, create drama, or keep score. Maybe this is a little bit for another day, but I believe much of the hatred against Trump, because it was, as we just outlined last night, it was totally delusional. Like, you could have political policy differences, of course, right? But there's like crazy hysteria. I think a vast majority of that was a projection of people's personal trauma from their childhood and or bitterness about life today. And Trump was just like one thing that the nation can, the people who hate themselves can collectively project their issues on. And while those people now think everything's like the nation can heal now, no, because you're still there, right? Like that, like you can't run from yourself, right? That's the old line. No matter where you go, there you are. You think you can run from your problems by like quitting your job and starting a new job, but you're at your new job too. Or you can move to a different state and leave all your problems behind, but nope, you'll still be there, right? So I think a lot of people, they hate Trump, and now that Trump's gone, they think their lives are gonna be so much better. Nope, you're still there. And there's not gonna be any healing or unity after this, not because conservatives are all of a sudden gonna start freaking out about things, but because the left will never be happy. You think the group of people who have been tearing down statues to Abraham Lincoln are finally like, oh, okay, we can get back to normal now? No way. Trump wasn't the end of their war. Back it up a little bit. So we live in a postmodern culture. This election doesn't change any of the cultural realities in our country. And culture is what matters. Politics, it was Breitbart who said, politics is downstream of culture. Culture's up here, and then all the effects, everything that comes out of culture affects politics down here. But culture is first. Culture matters the most. So we can do a quick background of this. So modernism versus postmodernism. Modernism, it started in the 17th century, and it says that the world is clearly defined and measurable, right? Things are clearly defined and measurable. Postmodernism says that certainty is impossible. So they're different. So modernism says that truth can be known definitively. Postmodernism says that truth can never be known definitively. Now, this whole postmodern thing breaks down really quick, because how can that be known? Right? So a postmodernist will say, I am absolutely certain that nothing can be certain. Right? So it's self-defeating right from the jump. And instead of truth and facts and timeless principles, because those can't possibly exist, everything instead is based on feelings. And we've seen that these last 4+ years, right? Safe spaces and all that, right? It's all about feelings. And feelings are a terrible guide, right? Now, you would think that all the cynicism of truth and the cynicism and attack against traditional values and institutions, you'd think it would create a humility in a postmodernist person, right? So you'd think a postmodernist would say, hey, nothing can really be known, So I don't know either. Here's what I think. What do you think? I'm curious. I mean, nothing can really be known, but let's talk about it. It's not how postmodernists act. Postmodernism makes people more arrogant and proud and confident that they, meaning their feelings, are right. And you must obey me. Because postmodernists project and they deconstruct society, but never themselves. And it doesn't matter who won the election. Right? And yesterday, I think, or the other day, we talked about all the great news from the Republican Party on state races and congressional races and obviously the Senate and all these other great things. None of that matters. None of that changes culture. Postmodernism is here to stay. The presidential race, the congressional races have nothing to do with it. It is full steam ahead on postmodernism, even with all the healing that's going to be going on. So I just want to create a distinction, because I think the national conversation doesn't, between politics and culture. We've been very focused on politics these last few weeks, obviously, right? But, I mean, it matters, right? But politics is a reflection of culture. It's culture first. After massive cultural changes, and I think we said, I'm certain we said this before the election, that I think I painted the picture of, because we got this great kids book. It's by Bill Bennett, and it's called The Children's Book of Virtues, and there's The Children's Book of America. It's great. Stories that could never be printed today. The book's from like 1980. You should definitely get it. But one of the stories is the story of this kid in Holland, and he has to go deliver something for his mom to this older guy, and he's walking back, and the dam has a hole in it, and he puts his finger in the dike to prevent the town from being flooded, and he has to stay there all night, and it's cold and it's freezing and he's shivering, but he must save the town, and then someone discovers him in the morning, and what a hero this kid is, right? It's this great story. So I created the analogy like Trump is just the guy putting his finger in the dam to keep the whole postmodernist progressive culture from flooding and destroying the town. But even if Trump did that, even if Trump won and stuck his finger in the dam, we still have this problem here, right? Like, we would still, in the meantime, need to have a cultural awakening in our country so that the dam wouldn't even be at risk of overflowing in the first place. Does that make sense? We can't fix the government until we fix our culture. And fixing culture is a lot harder than voting one time. Because fixing culture requires you first to change your life and fix yourself. And that's a non-starter for almost everyone, right? No one wants to fix themselves. I'm perfect. Progressives and everyone, really, but progressives have all the fixes to change the world. But any of these culture makers in our country, you look at them, they're miserable. They're absolutely miserable. How many of these progressive culture makers, like musicians and people in Hollywood and all the rest, professors, how many of them would you ever want to watch your kids? Would you ever take personal life advice from them? Of course not. So you can't change culture until you change yourself, and no one wants to do that. And then after you change yourself, you start changing your family, which is really hard to do, even if you do want to do it, because all of culture is telling you to do all the wrong things. And most people don't even see their blind spots and how they've been sucked into the cultural norms of our postmodern world. And I see it all the time with raising kids. I see all these families. Kids run the show. Kids run the show in homes. And that's the cultural norm. Why is that the cultural norm? Because Rousseau and postmodernism says that kids are born innocent and pure and wonderful and perfect and insightful. And it's adults that have become corrupted. So we need to listen to the children. Oh, the children are great. The children are wonderful. The children are perfect. You know, back in the day, what were kids? Kids were seen, not heard. Don't speak unless spoken to. Why? Because you're a stupid kid. And the adults know. That was the modernist belief. But the postmodern belief is kids are genius. Kids are brilliant. Kids are innocent and pure. It's the adults who are corrupted. This is Greta Thunberg. What's Greta Thunberg's authority? Nothing. She's a kid. That's it. Literally, that's her authority in a postmodern world. Because she hasn't been corrupted by the forces of the universe yet, because she's a kid, right? And it's to the point when you see it, like an extreme example is children now tell their parents what gender they are when they're 8 years old, right? Like that's like the pinnacle of kids know everything. But you see it like all the time. Kids just run the show. in homes because kids are perfect. That's a postmodernist belief that most people don't even see just because we're swimming in this soup our entire lives. We can give a billion examples. The point is, we're not getting any less divisive just because Trump may not be the president anymore. Because he wasn't even that divisive. He wasn't even really that divisive. I guarantee you when Mike Pence or whoever runs, the media is going to do this whole thing of, oh, well, Mike Pence is really the problem. And honestly, Trump wasn't really that bad. Trump kind of was a pretty moderate guy on a lot of things. I mean, he was a big supporter of gay marriage. He wasn't some Christian bigot like Mike Pence, right? So Trump really wasn't that divisive. It was a media creation. They made a lot of money being divisive. You think they're going to stop? You think they're just going to all of a sudden, right? I mean, the gay activists, they got everything they wanted. Everything they wanted. And instead of moving on with their lives, they started pushing the whole transgender kids thing. The Lincoln group, right? The Lincoln group, the Never Trumpers who spent, I think, like $70 million getting rid of Trump, trying to get rid of Trump. Now they're spending money, they're moving on to fight the Republicans in Georgia. What? I thought you guys' point was to get rid of Trump. And now they're just anti-every Republican. Well, why? Why will they never go away, the Lincoln group? Because they're making a ton of money. They will always divide us because they're making money. I gotta go. The point is, the march through the institutions that's been going on for decades now, that wasn't to get rid of Trump. They've been doing that for a lot longer than Trump. And they're not gonna stop now. Yes, conservatives need to win elections, no doubt about it, but you can't do that unless we first change the culture. You can't change the culture until we change ourselves, and no one wants to do that. So to get our culture back on track, we gotta make radical changes in our life. And that's what I know I'm gonna focus on a lot moving forward here. And truly, and I really mean this, I am super grateful for how bad our culture has gotten. My wife gets very upset about how rotten our culture is. And I say, no, it's wonderful news. It's wonderful. Because if our culture was just like, bleh, like it's been for maybe the past few decades, or it was when I was growing up, then I'd probably still fall for all the lies because it wouldn't be blatant enough. But our culture is so obviously rotten now, I'm out. And I'm grateful for how clear it is. I'm out. I'm completely disconnecting from all of the popular culture forces that are pushing postmodernism into my and my kids' brains. I'm done. And it's liberating. It feels great. Fight back first by disconnecting from all of that. Question every input in your life. Reevaluate every habit in your life, every routine, everything you ever thought was true. Reevaluate everything you do. All the things you do just because your parents did it that way. Everything you eat, everything you say, everything you think, everything you worry about, everything you focus on, what time you go to bed, everything you do in your life needs an audit. Do I do this because it's good? Or do I do it just because I always have? Or because my parents did? Or because the culture says I should? Or because that's what I think everybody else is doing? COVID was a really good time to rethink routines because we had to, right? Everything got upended. Post-election, it's a really good time to reevaluate every other aspect of our lives. First, we curate our inputs. Then we can see the truth clearly. That will change culture. Then conservatives can actually start winning elections by landslides. Talk about some legal battles, some legal potentials that the president has coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to talk about the legal challenges that the president is making and his road to the White House in 2020. Derek Muller's here. He's a professor of law at Iowa Law School. Derek, how are you, sir?
Good.
Good to talk to you. Let's start with Pennsylvania. This seems to be the biggest hurdle to climb. About 100,000 votes down right now, something like that. What are the avenues the president's going to try to take here?
Yeah, so the litigation's sort of taken a couple of different tacks right now. One was, well, we were denied observers in the polling places were to look at the canvassing of ballots, but that sort of ship has sailed now as more and more of those ballots are counted. They want a legal challenge to get entitled to look at what's happening, but looking only gets you so far, right? You can maybe prevent shenanigans, but then sort of challenging shenanigans is another thing. Another case is up before the Supreme Court. This is one that happened before the election, saying The state Supreme Court created a new rule saying, even though the statute on the books says ballots have to be in by Election Day, we as the state Supreme Court are going to create a new rule saying, essentially, we think that we have to have ballots postmarked by Election Day, received within 3 days after Election Day. So that's like a batch of ballots that have been segregated, that can be counted separately, that the Trump campaign might challenge. But even if you won on that, it's not clear how many ballots there are. It might be 10,000. It's not clear. They're not all going for Joe Biden, right? There's some divide among those ballots. So that's an unclear path. The final one, stems out of litigation that's been being filed, and especially one that was filed yesterday, essentially trying to allege systemic problems throughout the state of Pennsylvania, that counties are acting inconsistently, that they're confirming absentee ballots inconsistently. One hard thing, though, is it sort of restates a lot of claims that have already been filed. And some of these things were passed by a Republican legislature last year and sort of recognized some home rule and some local sort of variances in the procedure. So I think it's a really tough thing, right, to try to challenge an election, with that kind of a margin or with that kind of a scope.
So the ballots that arrived after the election, I could see those being thrown out, maybe, right? But again, we don't know how many, right? You say maybe 10,000. Do we have any idea?
But yeah, so when I was looking at some of the reports, I think Philadelphia had said they got 500 in the 2 days after the election, not counting the 3. One of these rural counties was saying it was about 0.1% of all ballots that came.
Okay.
We're just talking about very small batches.
Of course not. So even if those are thrown out, the first thing you mentioned, how poll workers were not allowed to observe, or whatever that even means, even if that can be proven or whatever that would look like, to throw those ballots out sounds like a huge ask, right?
Yes. Yeah. So very rarely do courts want to say, we're going to throw out the election and hold a new one, right? Because that's the kind of stage we're at right now. Once we've counted those ballots, they're counted, right? You're not going to go circling around and pull one out of the bin and say, oh, by the way, this is one that was sort of improperly dropped. And they're anonymous for a reason, right? They're secret ballots. So you can then throw out an election and, but you need, gobs of fraud. You need gobs of hard evidence of fraud. And when that happens, it's rare that you have that evidence. And when it does, courts throw it out, but just it's a heavy ask.
Okay, let me give you Wisconsin. So what I understand about Wisconsin is maybe the closest to things that could be thrown out. Let me give you my interpretation, which is wrong, and then you get. So my understanding was that when someone does an absentee ballot, they need a witness and the witness's address. And if they don't have it, it says very clearly on the ballot that your vote will not be counted. And apparently some clerks were told that they could just fill out the witness address, but that's illegal, and those ballots will be thrown out. Is that true at all?
Probably not. Let me say that. First, it's good to have, in my view, right? I agree with you. If you have a clear rule up front, people should be sticking to it, right? And if you're not sort of adhering to the procedures in place, it should be this sort of universally accepted rule. So one problem that came out of this Wisconsin case, for instance, is the Wisconsin Election Commission has been pretty generous with its interpretation of the rules ahead of Election Day, providing this guidance. And the rule says things like there has to be an address on there, and it's not the clearest whether or not the person who filled out the ballot has to complete out the address, as opposed to somebody later on who can say, oh, if we find the witness and we know who the witness is and we can put their address on there, so if we follow up with them, if there's any problem, if they've committed perjury, that's what we need. So there seems to be an ambiguity to suggest that maybe anyone can fill out the address, as long as it's the legitimate address, to sort of ensure that the ballot will be counted. Because the harsh remedy here, right? Think about the remedy. If you forget to fill out your address and somebody helps fill it in for you so that your ballot counts, you don't feel like you committed fraud. You don't feel disappointed that someone helped you get your ballot across the finish line, even though it looks like a technical violation of the statute. So this is the hard place that happens right now. We can talk, especially before Election Day, all day long. What are the rules? What are the procedures? What kind of guidance should we have? When it gets to after Election Day, we're counting the ballots. it gets to be a very hard thing to then go back and say, no, we're going to yank all these ballots out of the ballot box because somebody was trying to make sure that the ballots would count. Not that they're fraudulent, right? We're not even saying that they sort of failed to comply with some technical violation, which it's a violation. There's no question about it. But what do you do as sort of a remedy on the back end? That's the challenge happening right now.
Yeah. What's your gut tell you about the Supreme Court? Because that's where this would ultimately go to, surely, right? So what does the Supreme Court do, knowing what Alito did with Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, again, you've got. He can't just win in Pennsylvania, right? He's got to win in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. I mean, you have to pick up several states. So that's running the table, right? That's finding a lot of these places. So I think there's an outside chance he can still win on that Pennsylvania case. As you point out, Justice Alito ahead of Election Day was really interested in this Pennsylvania question, thought Pennsylvania got it wrong. 2 other justices joined him. Justice Kavanaugh wrote separately on a different case on a related issue. Justice Barrett wasn't on the court yet. And so you're looking, okay, well, I see a lane for this small batch of ballots in Pennsylvania on this issue. But once you start spinning it out to some of these other questions, I think it becomes a much tougher ask. I think it becomes a much more difficult thing if in all of these states you're trying to show up with, well, you know, I couldn't get close enough to the table here. Okay, is that a reason to throw out the election? Right, that's the question.
Okay, what is Barr? So what did Barr do? Was it yesterday? He made some announcement or something. What is that technically?
Yeah, so it's not clear because I'm seeing two sides of what this looks like. So let me set up both sides. One is it says, the Department of Justice, we have an election crimes division. We have a provision that's designed to enforce federal election laws and ensure that there's not fraud and corruption in our election process. Before you start anything, make sure you have substantial evidence. Don't just go on a fishing expedition. Make sure you've got something when you begin looking. So that's, I think, in some ways that might just be boring, run-of-the-mill, totally vanilla kind of memorandum that doesn't really suggest anything except to sort of appease the president and say, hey, we're on it, we're doing something, chill out. On the flip side, the chief of that election crimes division resigned shortly after the memo was circulated, stepped down from his position, saying, I don't want to be a part of this. And there's a suggestion then that maybe the federal government is starting to investigate some of these things and what that might mean ahead of the election. It's worth making a contrast actually to 2000. The Clinton White House and Janet Reno, they were not intervening in what was happening in Florida. They were very hands-off. In fact, so hands-off that the Gore campaign was a little bit frustrated into that process, right? Because Gore was just litigating this stuff in Florida and the Department of Justice wasn't getting involved. So it's not clear, right, at this moment what's going to happen. Is this just sort of, we're just eyeing irregularities, or is there some actual federal investigation happening here? It's a little too early to say, but I sort of highlight those are the two worlds out there.
Yeah, and if we want to connect some dots, which I did yesterday for like 5 minutes, and I was like, nah, like I started going crazy. But like apparently Barr met with McConnell, and then McConnell right after that came out and spoke, that we got it right. So what do they know that we don't know? Do you think there's anything to that, or are they just kind of playing the game?
Well, I think they're definitely playing the game. Right? I think there's no question that Republicans want to be unified in saying, and it's fair to point out before the election, what did people say? Be patient. Count every vote, wait until we have finality. But they were saying that before the election, right? So I also understand sort of running that out. Say, we've got a little bit of time here. We've got a Georgia election on January 5th that decides control of the Senate. We've got an angry Republican base. And we're going to be out there saying we're going to count every vote. We're going to ensure that everything's fair. We're going to be out there investigating fraud. Democrats are hypocrites because they were complaining about the exact same thing 4 years ago when they said that Russia stole the election, right? So there's certainly that game. The question, though, is, right, there's no doubt that I think both Barr and McConnell's statements have suggested at some point this runs out, right? At some point, there's going to be an electoral college that meets December 14th. They'll cast their votes, and then we'll kind of be over. So I'm looking, in my view, that there's going to be a lot of sort of fighting and litigation. December 14th for me is that hard deadline. That when the electors meet in state capitals, that's going to be sort of end game, and we're gonna move on.
Okay, that's the timing of it. Well, thanks a lot, Derek. Right? How much did I want you to come here and be like, Slater, here's the path. He's going to crush in all these states.
Look, Believe me, I mean, I would love, you know, if you had a lot more evidence, if you had one state, right? If you got one state and it was one state down to 1,000 votes or something, I mean, even you know, 5,000 votes. I'm sitting there saying, yeah, you know, I can see it. You know, if I squint hard enough, I see it. The problem, it's stacking it up, and that's the problem, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk again, Derek. Let's talk again. Once they flip Pennsylvania, then we'll have you back, and I'll rub it in your face. No,
Yes.
No, let's do it again, Derek. I appreciate you, professor of law at Iowa Law School. Thanks, Derek. All right, we'll come back and we'll talk about that Georgia Senate race and what the Republicans need to do to not lose that stupid thing. Are you kidding me, Georgia? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So everybody's talking about the Senate races in Georgia, right? And how this is will determine the outcome of the Senate, who controls the Senate, which is only partially true because even if they lost both, it'd be 50-50. But you have Joe Manchin, who's in West Virginia, who's a Democrat, but not really. He's really a Republican. So even then, it's not really who controls the Senate because the Republicans still will. Either way, I'm not worried about these Georgia Senate races at all. I think when you add the Libertarian vote, you take that out of it. And when you add a very ticked off country boy in all of Georgia, like I'm not going to let my state controlled by Atlanta. I think you have a massive turnout for Republicans. And the Republicans won those races by a lot. They just didn't get above that 50.0 threshold. Anyway, enough of me. Joseph Pinion's here. What's up, Joseph? How are you, man?
Good to be with you, my friend.
You too. I just threw a lot out there, but are you worried about these Republican races? I know it's going to be the center of the universe for the next 2 months, but I'm not worried about them at all. What do you think?
I mean, look, I think the hard truth is that, you know, look, first of all, they're still counting the votes in Georgia, right? So I think that this notion that somehow that all has been resolved and Biden has definitely won the state, they haven't even finished counting the votes, and the margin is such that it's going to trigger an automatic recount. So I just think that at some point, you know, the people who run elections have decided that there is a certain threshold by which they recount the votes themselves because there's a potential for them to make mistakes. So we should just accept the fact that we just don't actually know what the final outcome in a place like Georgia actually was. Moving beyond that, I think that we also need to focus on the fact that, to your point, if you look at the special election, which had featured Collins and Senator Kelly Loeffler and now the Reverend Warnock, the Democrat who's running there, if you add up all the votes that were cast for Republicans, and if you add up all the votes that were cast for Democrats, because obviously it was this jungle field, the Republicans got more votes. Obviously, if you add in look what happened with Senator Perdue and obviously John Ossoff, who has the unique distinction of running possibly the most expensive congressional race in the history of America and losing it, and then turning around and running one of the most expensive Senate races in the history of America and losing it. One thing seems to be consistent is that when he puts his name on a ballot in the state of Georgia, he loses. So I think at some basic point, yes, the Republican Party needs to be vigilant, particularly because in the event that these legal challenges don't meet the muster, we are going to be talking about the last stand for the check on unfettered democratic spending and policies that they want to implement that have never worked in the history of the world. So we should take it deathly serious because the stakes are that high. But I think if I'm talking about it with my Republican strategist hat on, I think that we just need to accept the fact that we're in good shape, but we need to make sure that we get all hands on deck.
Yeah, I'd rather this runoff be in Georgia than, I don't know, pick like Arizona or right, Nevada or something. Okay, tell me about the Democratic candidates. Who are these two guys? I didn't know even about Ossoff, and who's the Reverend?
So, I mean, look, Reverend Warnock is just one of those individuals who kind of caught fire in a crowded field, who was able to galvanize support, particularly in the African-American community, and the Christian community. He was and really carried the day as the preeminent Democrat in that field. So, look, obviously he's going to be going head-to-head with Senator Loeffler. She's obviously going to have a tremendous amount of resources behind her. And obviously this is going to probably turn into dueling Senate races, like dueling banjos, where we're going to spend a whole bunch of money there. Conversely, in the other race, which was the normal race, not the special election, you had John Ossoff, who, again, had previously run in that special election in that Georgia Georgia congressional race. That we had spent boatloads and boatloads and boatloads of money on. That turns out that he lost that one as well. So, I mean, look, I think ultimately, if you're looking at what happened in the state of Georgia, if the current results hold, Georgia was in many ways perhaps the Trump referendum, in the sense that the state of Georgia decided to go into a ballot box and cast more votes for Republicans to represent them in Congress, and yet decided that somehow they wanted Joe Biden to be the president of these United States. And so I think, to me, that is discouraging on some levels, but also encouraging to the sense that the state of Georgia still very much seems to feel as if the best representation for them are Republicans espousing conservative values.
I think that's right. And it's going to be very curious to see if this race is, if the people in Georgia vote just purely based on party, or if the personalities of the people involved really make a difference, or if it's just red and blue, which I think it might be.
I mean, I think at this point, go ahead. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about, you're talking about a 60-day campaign. It's basically a sprint. This is going to be base, red meat, turnout. That's all this election is going to be about. And I think Republicans historically around the country do well in specials. We shouldn't take it for granted. But I think, again, if we pin our ears back and talk about the issues, talk about the existential threat that a Biden presidency could present to the way of life, to your point, a country boy will always survive. And you've got a whole bunch of angry country boys down in Georgia right now who I think want to make sure that their voice is heard.
Totally, and I think that wins. Real quick, we only got about a minute. This graph right here, these are all the counties in Georgia, and their turnout increased from 2016, and they all went up a little bit here and there. And then look at those those are the 5 counties around Atlanta. What the heck happened? Assuming these aren't just all fake ballots, Joseph, we're not gonna go there. What is up with voter turnout in Atlanta and get out the vote there?
I mean, look, obviously it's well documented. Stacey Abrams registered over 800,000 new voters. That's a real thing. But she's not the only one that registered voters. Republicans also are registered voters. And so, look, it's peculiar that we have these spikes that seem to be almost statistically anomalous. Now, is that because of the fact that we had COVID and people just voted in an anomalous manner? Or is it because there is something that is, afoot? We don't actually know. But we should accept the fact that we don't know, and we should want to actually say with clear certainty who actually won these elections on a state-by-state basis, because it has an impact on the sanctity of our democracy. So, look, I think we're going to have an automatic recount in Georgia anyway. The Trump campaign is filing lawsuits. We should want those things. Joe Biden should actually join President Trump in asking for these recounts if his true goal is to unite this country, as he claims, and not to continue in this politics of division that people like AOC want to perpetuate when they talk about bringing back McCarthyism and Maoism and making lists of people that they disagree with for the purposes of punishing them into perpetuity.
Yeah, pretty sure you're on that list. Joseph Pinion, what's your Twitter? How can people follow you, Joseph?
Yeah, you can find me at Joseph Pinion, one word, like opinion without the O, on Twitter. Instagram, I am Joe Pinion. But yeah, we'll continue to watch, be the sentinels on the watchtower, see what happens.
Yeah, there you go. We'll do it again. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
That's it. That's the show. Do it again tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater. Have a great rest of your day. Spread the word.